The ones she had lost, and the ones she had found, and the ones who had loved her the most.
Okay, I'm good after that intro. Let's get into one of the best movie genres no one talks about, fantasy. Let's go ahead and get the elephant in the room out of the way. It's The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings trilogy doesn't have a movie below a 9 out of 10. That's pretty much objective. And it could be the best movie trilogy of all time, but that's a debate for another day. Now, The Fellowship of the Ring introduces us to Middle Earth and just a loaded cast of characters with a phenomenal cast as well, and it gives us phenomenal locations in Middle Earth, Rivendell being one of the coolest things that has been in film ever, and probably the coolest fantasy setting in this entire movie series. And it has a phenomenal Lego set, which, if you know me, I do like Legos, and I have some Lego content on this channel. The link will be up here. Anyways, getting back to this, The Two Towers also gives us probably the most famous movie speech of all time when Samwise the Brave tells Frodo that there's some good in the world. Now, that also has to pair with the themes that are going on in Lord of the Rings. They are not too complex, but they are very grand, and it's very much a huge battle of good versus evil. And in The Two Towers, Helm's Deep, I think that's the best battle in movie history. Yes, better than the in-game battle, and yes, better than the third act of Return of the Jedi. And why do I believe this? Well, because in Helm's Deep, you really do not believe that any of those characters with Aragorn and Legolas are going to survive. You think they're going to die. You think they have no chance. There's no way that the orcs do not crush them, and they find a way through. It's just complete epicness. The set there is awesome, and I was just blown away when I saw this in theater the other week. And then you come to the third movie of the trilogy that has won the most Oscars of any movie ever. Yes, I know it's tied with Ben-Hur, Titanic, but Return of the King is just insane. And without having to say too much, I'll just read you off the list of Oscars that it has won. It won Best Picture, it won Best Director, Best Writing, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Art Direction, Set Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup, Best Music and Original Score, Best Music and Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects. All of those very well deserved, and it is one of the perfect endings to anything ever, not just a trilogy or movies, just anything like comic books, video games, or shows. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say about The Lord of the Rings. There's a lot that's been said on the internet about them, but I actually want to give some credit to The Hobbit. I actually think if The Lord of the Rings did not exist, The Hobbit would be held in higher regards. I think it's one of those things that gets compared to something that's perfect, so obviously it's not going to look as good, just like the prequels and the original trilogy of Star Wars. It kind of falls into those categories where it's like, yeah, it's definitely not as good, but that does not mean it's bad, and I think people give it unnecessary hate. The Unexpected Journey has a great introduction to Bilbo Baggins and explaining the ring. Then you get to the Desolation of Smaug, where you have an insane cliffhanger, and you have probably the coolest dragon, not just in video games, not just in movies, not just in comic books, just I think the coolest dragon in anything ever, hands down, period, and it's played by Benedict Cumberbatch. I mean, what more do you want? And the Battle of Five Armies, yes, it does defy the laws of physics a little bit, but I do think it's a fun ending, and I just think the Middle Earth movies and The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, they're just some of the greatest experiences that you can have in theater. And yes, it'll take you about 24,000 hours to watch them, but I do think it is worth it at the end of the day. You cannot mention fantasy films without mentioning Harry Potter in the same breath. It is just impossible. Harry Potter appeals to so many different people around the world, and along with Spider-Man, I believe Harry Potter and Spider-Man are the two most relatable characters in big mega franchises. Now, don't include something like Will Hunting or Joe from Little Women. Those aren't mega blockbuster franchises. Of course, if you're going into a drama, you're going to get characters that are a little more relatable. So don't quote me on saying Harry Potter and Spider-Man are the two most relatable characters in film. That is not what I said, so don't be doing that below in the comments. Anyways, the reason that I think Harry Potter is a little bit more relatable than some of the other Chosen One characters that we see, like Anakin, Paul Atreides, and Neo, is because yes, he is a chosen one figure, but he's not the most talented or overpowered character in these films. He's not. He does have some talent there, don't get me wrong, but Harry Potter has to go through a lot of struggles. His upbringing is not great. He lives with his aunt and uncle who do not like them. He doesn't even know what really happened to his parents. Then he has to find out about the tragedy to his parents. Now, he does get a lot of money, I will say that, but that does not replace everything that he lost. At the beginning, he just likes to be with his friends. He's not trying to be some Anakin Skywalker figure where he wants to be on the Council of Jedis. He really just wants to be himself, and I think a lot of people can relate to that growing up. You kind of just want to spend time with your friends. Most of us aren't born into, being destined for some great thing, but that doesn't mean we can't do great things, just like Harry Potter does in the films, and I think that's why Harry Potter resonates with a lot of people. Now, on top of just the messaging, Harry Potter's world building is insane. I think we can all agree Hogwarts is some place that we'd actually like to visit and to live in, and being a setting like that. The music is phenomenal, the visuals are phenomenal, and it has, again, like Lord of the Rings, some of the greatest characters in fiction, period. You have Snape, Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, Hagrid, Dumbledore, Voldemort. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And yes, like most fantasy things, there's awesome creatures. Wizarding World just hasn't given us Harry Potter, it's given us Fantastic Beasts, and just like The Hobbit, I do think there's a significant drop off in quality, but not bad enough where you wouldn't call some of these things cinematic. Now, I do think that Fantastic Beasts does give us the creatures that we are looking for, and Newt Scamander is another phenomenal character introduced to us in film. So yeah, that's just my opinion on the Wizarding World and why it's great and why it's a great fantasy edition. Believe it or not, Pirates of the Caribbean did not come from some big IP or comic book or anything like that. It came from one of Disney's amusement park rides. And it's this creativity and just great, rich ideas that I think the modern Hollywood is missing right now. We do not get a lot of these ideas that are just stemming from nothing. We're getting a lot of things that are being remade. We're getting a lot of sequels. We're getting a lot of big IPs that are being made. There's nothing wrong with that. You still have great projects being made, like Barbie or the idea of Oppenheimer last year that we got. There's nothing wrong with that, but we do need some creativity, and Pirates of the Caribbean in the fantasy realm is where we have gotten that. So unlike Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean was completely started fresh, and I think that's what makes these movies cinematic, at least the original trilogy. Now, The Curse of the Black Pearl, regardless of how you look at it, it was accepted great by fans and it was accepted great by critics, and that's definitely has to do with just being a great idea. And I think when most of you think of pirates, you definitely think of Jack Sparrow because of Johnny Depp. He is phenomenal in this. You have an amazing cast. Keira Knightley is in this as Emma, and also you have Orlando Bloom, who's kind of coming off the success of Lord of the Rings. So you just have this kind of mixture of these three phenomenal actors and actresses coming together at the right time, and then you just have this rich world of fantasy where you have these pirates and you have the English, whatever they are, I don't know what they are. They're just bad English people, that are trying to tax people, because at the time taxes were evil, just like they are now. And yes, so you have this rich world in the fantasy realm where you go, and in the first movie, it's kind of grounded, but then they're turned into skeletons at night, and you're like, dang, that is awesome. And it's goofy, but serious ideas like that I think Hollywood kind of needs to bring back. Not everything has to be The Dark Knight to be serious. And then you get to Dead Man's Chest and At World's End. Even though I think these movies definitely have flaws and are super convoluted, I think both of these films are cinema. I really do. Davy Jones is probably the best thing that's ever been made by CGI. And yes, that could be a hot take, but he still looks phenomenal to this day. And the motions of the squid moving on his face are crazy. We get a Kraken finally in a film that looks awesome. Final battle in the third one where they're literally getting married on the ship when there's three different factions of pirates and the British and Jack Sparrow and Emma and all of them. They're just them getting married on there and fighting in a whirlpool while it's raining. That's the type of stuff and risk that I think cinema that needs to be taken right now and that we're just not getting. So yes, I know there's a little bit of a drop off in the last two Pirates movies, but I still like that it's an original IP, and I think for the most part there's a lot of cinematic stuff here, and Pirates of the Caribbean is a movie franchise that if you guys haven't seen, you should go check out for sure. Although I have never seen any of the Twilight films, I do want to put them on here because I think they actually drawn to fantasy, and that is women. Pirates of the Caribbean I don't think has a huge draw towards women, and Lord of the Rings definitely does not. Harry Potter does have that, but Twilight I think is the one that really flipped the switch where it's more women that wanted to go see it rather than men, which I think is a great thing. But I think it also had a good effect on the when something like Twilight actually helped women open up to the idea of cinematic universes, and something like the MCU, which helped us then Red Notices and Ghosted that are just being made by algorithms. So I do have to give it props where props is due, and Robert Pattinson will forever be how I envision a vampire. Next up, we have Narnia, and this is one of the coolest fantasy franchises that ended way too soon. I watched these films when I was a kid. They would be shown on Freeform a lot, and I used to think they were B movies, but now that I've grown up and rewatched them and seen the passion that were put into them, I realize now that that is not the case whatsoever. They tell an intriguing story with intriguing characters with just awesome battles. They have everything that you can want in fantasy. They have huge armies, they have a grandiose story, they have themes of good versus evil, they have a love story in it, they have talking animals. I mean, this is just a great film franchise, and the rumors are that Disney wants to greenlit the next film in the series, and I hope that this is the case. And although this is not one of my favorite fantasy franchises, I do recommend Narnia to anyone that likes fantasy. I do want to shout out real quick, this is just going to be in the middle of the video, I forgot to edit this in there, but the Wrath of the Titans movies, although I do think there's a ton wrong with them, I do think they have really cool visual effects. Wrath of the Titans and Clash of the Titans are what I'm talking about. They have really cool movie monsters, and I don't think they deserved a whole segment, but they are really cool as well, just for people that want something else to watch. Anyways, we're moving on to the next. How to Train Your Dragon was one of the best animated movies ever that spun off into 2 sequels that are supposed to be one of the best animated trilogies ever. Now, I can sadly say that I have not seen the second 2 installments. I know that's really weird. Just during my childhood, there's other movies that I went to go see. I really got into some other franchises, and for whatever reason, I just never saw the next 2 installments in this, so I can't attest subjectively to how those are, but I know objectively most of the people love them. I'm just going to talk about my time with the first one and why it's great fantasy. Introducing Vikings riding dragons is just a great idea. Usually you have at night, so I think that switch up is very creative in itself. And then just having this world of just insane different types of dragons was awesome for any like boy my age to see. And I can say that How to Train Your Dragon was one of the best theater experiences I have ever had. I went to see that movie in 3D, and anyone that knows basically this was one of the best 3D movies ever. The final fight with Toothless and Hiccup versus the giant mother dragon was just, it's one of the best scenes visually in movie history. It was just phenomenal. And just the idea around How to Train Your Dragon was just really, really cool, about a boy. It's basically a boy finds a dog story, but with the coolest dog possible and Toothless, and just the dragon's name's like Night Fury. That's just awesome, and I think the fantasy here is just incredible. Dungeons & Dragons is the most recent fantasy film or film franchise on my list, and it is on here for a very good reason. This movie, when it initially came out, got a 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. That has went down a little bit, and yes, I know Rotten Tomatoes is not the end-all be-all, but 6 out of 10 times I think it is pretty much accurate, and in this case it was. This movie has an excellent cast, it has excellent characters, and it definitely kind of plays a meta role on what fantasy characters are like. A lot of them are undermined, a lot of them are exactly like what you think fantasy characters are, but there's just a lot of great movie monsters in here. Having a dragon be fat was definitely a funny idea. This movie was just great. It was really smart. They had things that were set up in the beginning that came to help out in the end when they fight the witch. The maze scene with the gelatinous cube and the tiger things is just awesome. The girl that can transform. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, so please don't just crucify me or anything in the comment section because I don't know all the lingo. But yeah, this movie was great, and I highly recommend this movie to anyone. I really hope this becomes a fantasy cinematic universe or franchise, something along those matters. And yeah, I just really good movie, and I recommend it to anyone. Last but certainly not least, we have Shrek. I don't know how you guys thought you were going to get away with Shrek not being on this list, but if that was you, then I don't know what you were doing. Shrek is a phenomenal movie, and for you fans of the channel, yes, I'm going to watch Shrek 30 times in a row because I made that video. If it got a certain amount of likes within a certain amount of time, I would watch it that many times, so I haven't forgotten about that. If you have been watching and waiting for that, that still will happen. But anyways, let's get into why Shrek is on this list. Shrek is on this list because of the meta commentary and the jabs that DreamWorks took at Disney's fantasy movies. Shrek obviously is in here where instead of a knight in shining armor, you have an ogre in rusty armor. Instead of him riding his horse and steed, he is riding Donkey, and Donkey is his companion. Instead of having a well-mannered princess, you have Fiona. Fiona, I'm gonna leave that in there because that was pretty funny. But you have Fiona, who is not well mannered. She's kind of a bad A actually in the movie, and instead of having beautiful music in the background and being a musical, you have Smash Mouth in the background. So all those things were just brilliant. Instead of having some really cool, just awesome dragon as the villain, which there is a dragon in it, you have Lord Farquaad. So everything in here is just a subversion of expectations, and it was brilliant by the people that created Shrek. And Shrek also won the first Oscar for Best Animated Movie ever because that was the first year that they did it. So rightfully so, Shrek is one of the best fantasy films ever created. And yeah, everything here was just a subtle jab at Disney, and I'm not trying to throw shade at Disney, even though right now I think they're bad, because back then Disney was still firing on all cylinders. But anyways, I hope you like this video. Just give fantasy a little bit of credit because I think it's not talked about enough. And if there's a fantasy movie that I missed that's one of your favorites, just comment that below. And as always, have a great day and may God bless you.